Hi, everyone. I'm Alexander Fernandez, and welcome to Video Games Real Talk. We have a special episode for you today. I have really great guests calling in from all over the world. I have Geroge Bailey and Marko Kovacevic. Oh, my God. I said your name wrong, man. Marko, how do I say your name?
Kovacevic.
Kovacevic. There we go. So, Marko, what do you do over at the DSCI?
So first of all, thank you, Alex, for inviting us to your podcast. It's really an exciting opportunity. So my role within Digital Supply Chain Institute is being an executive director for membership and engagement, and trying to put it into a more creative, let's say, meaning is, my work is related to the finding the best new ways of how we can contribute and create the value for our members.
And George, what do you do over at the DSCI?
Well, like Marko, I'm his co-executive director, and I'm also the chief research officer. And I will say this: I think it's important to set this standard. I play a bazillion video games, and I'm good in none of them.
That's good to set out there so we can establish our gamer credibility from the outset. So we know if anyone out there playing Fortnite, you run into Geroge Bailey, just know he's a killer. He'll be out there getting ready to shoot you down. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you guys both joining me today for this episode. And, let's go ahead and set the ground stage for a moment because, we're using this acronym DSCI and people don't necessarily understand what is the DSCI and basically what is it? Why is the DSCI on a show about video games and the video games business? So, George, what is the DSCI?
Well, the DSCI stands for Digital Supply Chain Institute, and we're a not-for-profit. We're headquartered in New York, although we're all over the world. We're based in New York, but what we really do is help companies think about what their supply chain should look like in the future. And oh, by the way, a lot of what it should look like is very similar to a massive multiplayer video game. And we'll talk more about that, but it's really important to know that gaming and business kind of are coming together now in a new future.
Yeah, Marko, I mean, what else do you have to add on that one? That sounds like an exciting thing. What are you seeing on your end?
Well, as George mentioned, I think what we are now trying to do in, somewhere in the back end, when with the lights dimmed, we are practicing and playing games. And what we would like to show is that it's completely applicable in various different areas of supply chain transformation on one side, but as well business transformation, because we are firm believers also of reverse mentorship, approach, where we believe that the new generation for especially transformation in supply chain are coming, and that we will learn from the generation who is coming in the best ways of how to engage, transform, and then create a result.
That's amazing. So for everyone out there that's listening to this, the supply chain, why does the supply chain matter to you? Well, the supply chain is how products arrive to your door. It is the process in which products are manufactured, how they're created, how do they come together, how they're shipped to you, how they're delivered, and more importantly, how all of the different stakeholders on a worldwide basis come together to actually bring things that you want to buy and play. Now, obviously, the video games industry has a specific supply chain, which we'll talk about as well. But George, let me ask you something. In terms of the supply chain overall, I mean, it sounds like you've been, and from what I see in your background, you've been working pretty heavily in the commanding heights of the economy. So how did you get this all mixed up? Like, how did you get into this? Because, obviously now you're on a video game show. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think that there are a couple things. One is I have actually worked for very large companies, and I have actually made it into the senior leadership team of those companies. So I don't know if I'd say that's a commanding role, but I have run some big things. And I'll give you two examples. I worked at Sony. I reported to the chairman and chief executive officer of Sony. Actually, two of them. The first one was actually a knight, Sir Howard Stringer, based in London. And the second one was Kaz Hirai. And Hirai-san was based in Tokyo, but he was one of the key executives who developed the whole PlayStation business. And I did I still have a PlayStation. I'm sorry, I'm not an Xbox person, but I learned a lot about that market and how it works while I was at Sony. And that's where I began to think about, boy, the way that gamers play, the way they use information to make decisions, the way that they have this rotating idea of leadership so that when you're playing a game on a squad, it's not the old school command and control thing that we have in the big companies around the world. It's a new way to work. And it turns out that if you work that way in business, if you're a gamer in business, I think you're going to get better results than if you use the old school ways that we all learned in business school.
I think that's very true. And you know what? It's amazing. You worked at PlayStation, you worked at Sony during a very transformative process. I mean, at that time, that sounds like when the Knight was working there. Basically, you were in 2008, 2009. Were you there for PS3 to PS4? Is that the time frame you were there?
Yes. And I know a lot about this. I know more than I can tell you, actually, because before that job at Sony, I was a senior executive at IBM, and I ran a lot of different businesses, but the last one I ran was the global semiconductor business. Now, I don't know if gamers know. I think maybe gamers know this, but one of the key elements of a console is the processor. And so when I was running it at IBM, I made the processors that went into the Xbox and into the PlayStation. So they were the biggest clients, and it's really transformative when you have that kind of processing power. It was probably the single biggest, most powerful processor needed in private sector at that time. I'm talking about not counting mainframes and so forth, but man, it's a lot of power that you have in those consoles. And we were at Sony. We had to decide, what do we do about this? Maybe console gaming is going to go away. Maybe it's all going to be online because of the bandwidth and so forth. So we had to really decide: do we make money on selling consoles, or do we shift our business model to a more cloud-based one? And there's a lot of thinking about that. And it's like one of the key things is timing, just like it is in a game. Time is important.
It's so fitting that we're speaking right now, because basically just this week, PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox have both launched. And it's amazing to basically have someone on the show who was involved intimately at not only on the processing level, but then worked into the strategic level at one of the main platforms in our industry. And trust me, the video gamers out there, all the gamers, they totally know about the processing power. It is such a well debated and well mused type of topic that people get into fights on what's more powerful. So that's I'm sure if we have time, I want to pick your mind on some of these kind of like quasi how did that happen type of thing like that. But Marko, looking over at the DSCI and looking at this digital transformation that's taking over all traditional businesses here, you mentioned that you want to learn from this new generation. What is it that you're seeing specifically about the video games industry that you believe other industries can learn from?
I think there is like one area which George has located, and then we started working together on it. And that's, the first thing we saw, it's basically a change management concept, right? Because change management is always for the organizations. It doesn't matter if it's large or small. It's always like something strange and something new will happen, and we don't know how. And it usually goes by these very rigid rule books or processes, which become boring along the way. So what we realized, playing Fortnite per se, and as well using George's experience, and George might not be the best player, but he understands the mechanics, I think, better than anybody else. We found the correlation of multiplayer games and the way of how you can use that in the transformation within the business. And what we mean by it is the way of how you are transparent in a sense of communication, how you put the trust up front, towards the team. You don't play power game right away. And then on the other side, you really emphasize and utilize different skills from people rather than trying to compete who is better in the same. And having these simple examples, high level, putting into perspective of business is really a turnaround of a mindset. And especially the new generation, the let's say digital natives, as we can call them, right? When they come, for them is natural. For my generation, and I'm in my early 40s, it's still a challenging thing. You're still brought up, to just compete to be the best in the same area where everybody else is. And for the newcomers, we realize that everybody is willing to strengthen and excel on their particular, single skill, which is great and which is part of multiplayer, combining things. So that was an amazing thing we learned. And this is where we are now building a tool around, which we would like to test with the big players.
So, George, I want to deep dive on this. You wrote this amazing article that appeared in Forbes, and it seems like it was built upon what Marko had mentioned about what you had discovered. Can you take us through this a little bit and let us know what it is that you did figure out? And moreover, what do you believe that gamers could teach gaming executives?
Well, yeah, and I want to say one thing, Alex. Just it's not just they can teach gaming executives; they can teach business executives, whether they're running a business that's making medical devices or games or aircraft. And the first thing you realize when you start playing one of these games is that if you ever ran the game the way you run a company, you would be dead within seconds. The typical way of running a company is you have periodic reports that come out, you review them, you have team meetings, you discuss, you make a plan, you execute, you follow up. You move essentially at glacier speed. Now, when you play a game, you cannot do that or you'll be dead within seconds. And I'm talking about first-person shooter games or, multiplayer games where you're trying to, and these are true for all games, but I'm just focusing now on the Fortnite-like games. What you find out is that when you're playing, there are several things that are very, very important. One is you have instant access to data. Like if you're playing a game and you want to know, I'll use Fortnite as my favorite example is, if you want to know the value of weapons that you uncover in those treasure chests, you can click, see what the fire rate is, what the kill rate power is. You get all that stuff immediately. Then you can toggle back and decide which weapons to pick up and which ones to use. You can find out your own player stats plus the stats of the players that you're playing against. It's all there. But the way you use it, you click, toggle back into the game. So you're going back and forth real time making decisions. And the second thing is, like Marko said, when you're making decisions, it's not one leader telling the other three people on your team what to do. In fact, it's a very collaborative process, a way to work together where, Milo is the best shooter. And then maybe George reasonably knows where to go sometimes on the map. But anyway, you have people all contributing with what they're good at. And the people who take the lead are the people who take the lead when it's needed at that time, including as the building thing. If you have to build things around you, there's some people who do that better. So get the right people making the right decisions with the right data and making them fast. That's so critical for games. And guess what? That's what matters in business now, too.
That's fascinating. I mean, looking at this for a second, and, obviously, I grew up, I'm part of the gamer generation. And, I remember being told, oh, games, what a waste of time. It's not going to help you get a job, do something else. And now I'm sitting here after reading your article and obviously, speaking with you all. It is so clear how much gaming can actually contribute to the development of business and business executives overall. And I think this is something that as we start to go forward and into the future, into 2021 especially, these type of understandings in terms of how to structure an organization, how to utilize real-time data, it becomes more necessary than ever, especially because of things that are going on like COVID. So, what I'm curious about, George, is that if you look at basically your findings and from your article, where do you see things going? I mean, from your perspective, is there any limits, or do we think that this is just going to keep on going?
Well, the first thing I think that's happening now is that the pace of dramatic change continues to increase. And it's dramatic and it's unexpected. And this is very much like going through any video game where you have opposing players with different weapons coming at you at different times. You've got to make rapid decisions. The old model of running a business the old way doesn't work in that environment, no more than it would work in a game environment. So what I see happening is companies will start to get this. Now, the thing about business that's so great, it's a little bit like some people level up and some people quit. So you're either going to level up your game and learn to play this way, or you're going to be eliminated from the game. And I think we're going to see more and more companies who can't make the change wither away, and companies who know how to work this way, who have this kind of gamer mentality, they're the ones that are going to start winning. Now, there's one big obstacle, and I have to be honest about this. and Marko knows this as well as I do. There are some people, I would say most people who are running companies today who have never played a video game since Galaga or Pac-Man. And so, that's dangerous because, they don't get it. And so helping them make these choices is going to be important. Or the next generation is just going to end up starting companies and take it over.
So, what's interesting about that right there is that totally introduces the entire thing of Schumpeter's creative destruction.
Mm-hmm.
That is literally what you're speaking about, that moment in time. So, Marko, let me ask you something. Why is it that there are corporate executives? It's not just a generational thing. It can't be just, oh, well, I never played it, because clearly in the 70s, people were playing games. So what do you think is the hurdle for people to understand that there is something to be learned from the games industry and really gaming in general?
This is a very important question, Alex. And I think it's a question of sincerity, right? I think the general understanding of the games industry today, unfortunately, with majority of people, is that it's entertainment. And I think it's something how it started, but where it developed now and where it will be in the future is completely different, as George said, right? And this is something where you helped me when we met first time in Boston as well, to understand the magnitude of the change which games industry can do. And really, for me, openly, you have been an evangelist, and you can see now the let's say fruits of your work in that sense, because the things we have been talking about, like how, for instance, you can do that in a very traditional industry like supply chain, is amazing. What you can do with games in education, it's yet to be discovered, right? It's just starting, but it will be as well amazing. The way of how you can help people communicate with brands in the future as well, it will go into that direction. So what I would say, even for the generation where I am, for instance, it was embarrassing to say you are playing games, because that might be seen as you have a lot of free time, right? But why? Only because it has been seen just as an entertainment if you have more time than like you should, which is a big illusion. So in that sense, I think the new chapter is opening, and what you are doing, Alex, with your team as well, and what DSCI is doing is a start of that process of just revealing the potential.
No, that's fascinating. So let's George, did you have something you want to add to that?
Well, Marko's got it exactly right. And I was going to add one more thing is about 10 years ago, gamification became a buzzword. And there are all sorts of people who are going to gamify education. So, for example, we're going to bring gaming technology so that learning can be done more easily. And in fact, that's true right now. There's a lot of learning that happens with software that's based on game principles, where you play and you raise levels and you get points, and it's kind of fun. So that happened. And in fact, I went to the White House about 10 years ago and met with a woman who was running. She was actually appointed as the national gamification leader. I don't remember her exact title. And what happened was that idea was totally right, but it might have been a little bit too soon. And so I think now is when we're really going to start seeing the traction. So it's not like games are a new thing, as you said, Alex. They've been around for a while. But what's happening now is they've kind of permeated our society. Now they're part of how we live and work. And, when you have the next Call of Duty coming out, it's a big deal. It's bigger than a Hollywood movie announcement. I mean, Call of Duty is huge. So, these are the things that really have changed. And I think now is the time we can really start seeing some business changes in response to that.
I'm curious about this from the standpoint of, the DSCI. Your membership is quite impressive. I mean, you have really large companies that are really moving the economy. When you look towards digital transformation and just really in general, the future of business and supply chain, what is it that you see that ultimately you believe is going to basically really bring an interacting point with them to the game space? I know we've covered different aspects of it, but really, if you were to just kind of summarize one word, like you think, or one sentence, I should say, that this is what we think is going to end up happening, what would that be, George?
Oh, you gave me the tough question, Alex. The one sentence. Okay, well, I'm going to say my one sentence is that the game of business will be run like a video game.
That's deep. I mean, I can, winners, losers, and restart the match.
Yeah. The only issue is you can't, I don't know if you're going to be able to respond. I think, you might not. So it's just like sometimes you can't respond, but you better get it right. Otherwise, uh, doom. But if you get it right, fun. And so that I think, business people are not strange. Business people, they like to have goals. They like to go up levels. They like to be successful and win. And the consequences of not winning are bad. So they're not different. They just need to think about it a different way, and then we're going to see some real progress.
No, that's very true. The stakes are high, and this is one of those things where there is no reset button. There is high stakes, high rewards, high consequence when things go wrong. So, Marko, let me ask you same thing, same question that I posed to George. What do you think?
It's very hard to answer after champion like George is, but I'll try to move it to another perspective. And I would say for the big companies who are business to consumer and even business to business, in order to win hearts and minds of a new customer, they need to play under multiplayer game rules.
Very well said. One of the things that attracted us, Streamline Media Group, putting my hat on for a second, to the DSCI was the entire concept of digital transformation. The fact that the organization was forward thinking enough to see that gaming, video games in general, and the adaptation of technologies, interactive technologies, could be utilized in other industries and other arenas was quite exciting, especially coming from the fact that for years, for probably the greater part of 15 years, we've been pushing that as something that we think is phenomenal. And to have that opportunity to work with you both and to see what we have been able to accomplish thus far, and I believe we'll do more, I think is nothing short of spectacular, especially when you consider the fact that in the new world that we are all in, this new reality of work remote, work from home, Zoom fatigue, the need to collaborate, the need to solve problems quickly, the need to understand that we have short amounts of time and short amount of resources, that we need to deliver results. It really fits snugly with what George wrote with that article and really where the future of business is going. I truly believe, George, you were hitting it right on, and Marko as well, that business is going to learn from video games because in the end of the day, life is a game. The gaming industry is all about suspension of disbelief, rewarding behavioral mechanics, getting you to do things that basically progress the entire story forward or deliver the results that are required. And obviously that is going to be really key in this generational transition that's happening. I mean, we haven't even talked about that, but I'm curious, how do you see millennials and zennials and Gen Z entering these workforce now, entering these new positions in the supply chain and your traditional businesses? How do you see them affecting change now that we're here, George?
Well, I agree with both you and Marko that this is not about generation alone, because actually these principles apply across generations, and actually when people do it, they like it. So I don't want to make it sound like if you're a boomer, you can't play games. It's not true. On the other hand, when these new people enter the workforce, they are used to playing this kind of a sport. This is how they interact with their peers. This is how they get things done. They expect this pace of decision. They expect this kind of data. They expect a kind of collaboration among team players that, quite frankly, doesn't usually exist in big companies. So they're coming in, they're expecting this. If they don't get it, they're not happy. If they get it, they perform like stars. And some people will say, well, the millennials aren't motivated, the Gen Z are. No, they are very motivated. The issue is you're not talking to them the right way. You're not working with them. So we need to think differently about this and make it all work together. Now, I will say one thing. I got to be honest about this. Not everybody out there is good to play with. I don't know if you've seen us playing games, Alex, but sometimes you're on a squad and there's somebody who's an idiot. Like they don't know what to do. That's kind of like where I'm a bad gamer, so sometimes I'm not very good at things. Or sometimes they're selfish and they're not really taking time to help you when you need help or pitch in. And those are the kind of people you don't want to play with again. So when these people enter the workforce, pretty quickly it's going to sort into people who can play and collaborate and win, and people who really can't play, don't know how to collaborate, and lose. And, I know which team I want to be on.
No, I think that you hit that right on. And in life, just like in games, there are, what can we say, sore losers, poor players, poor stakeholders, bad team play. I don't know why, but it's funny how in the digital space, it reveals almost sometimes the true nature of people, because, I mean, maybe it's the anonymity of it. But, that is one thing that's true. I mean, it does permeate also in the business world. So I think that's going to be something where for a filter process, and I just think about it for human resources, imagine the ability to filter through people who really shouldn't be on the team and maybe shouldn't be playing the game with us. I think that maybe that's a little, maybe some people might take it harsh, but I think that honestly in today's, play and where we're at, we don't have time for bad stakeholders. We need people who can play and people that want to play together, that want to collaborate and cooperate. Marko, let me ask you something. With what you're seeing on the global stage right now, with your position within the DSCI, where do you think things are going? Where are we heading with digital transformation? People call it the Industrial Revolution 4.0. They call it Industry 4.0. What do you think? What's going to happen?
We have a great applied research which has been done by the Institute. And, that's where the Institute has formed now its approach. And it has been done 3.5 years ago. And it's still valid, right? It keeps on evolving from year to year, now from month to month, having COVID in mind. And it's related to a front side flip. And what we mean by it is like all the industries are basically taking this loop, this turn towards their customer. It doesn't matter if the customer is like, B2C or it's B2B. We are now more about listening what's going on with the needs of the customer, expectations, visibility to them, their education, which is growing constantly, the competition and everything else. So we cannot sit in our corner and say like, this is what we think and, everybody else should agree with us. But we should basically mirror and follow what's going on in our surroundings. So this is where we do feel that supply chains are going. And why? Because they're always touching the customer directly. So they are the last mile. It doesn't matter if it's a product or a service. The supply chain is going into every organization where you have, correlation, and it can be a product, but it can be a service as well. So what we see is that supply chains are first to hear, first to learn, and first to foresee. So far before, they have been seen just as a, let's say, logistical backbone. But I think COVID-19 has changed the game. This year has become a year of supply chains because people realize that supply chain is much more than that. Supply chain is a big part of a business brain. So we see that everything is moving towards the customer.
That's incredible. So, George, it looks like you may want to say something. Do you have something to add on that?
Marko's right. I think this front side flip idea is really an important thing. And when we came up with that idea, it came up with, we had 25 senior supply chain leaders from the top companies around the world. These are the big players, the big companies, but they're top people in supply chain. And what we worked out is that, what's important is doing this front side flip. And I don't know how many of your listeners are skateboarders or snowboarders. I happen to be a bad snowboarder. But when you do a front side flip, you launch and you come down and you're facing on your front side. And there's something about that makes sense. So like if you're running a supply chain, you've always faced the backside of your business, as Marko was saying. You're about suppliers and logistics and getting things delivered. And that's all important. But if you flip it and you're now about how can I make my customer happy? What are the things my customer would want? Then you've got a whole different animal. You've got something that will change the market. And you see that right now. As Marko said, COVID's changed the world. So it used to be we also go big shopping malls. Actually, I never did. But a lot of people went to shopping malls and bought things. But now they're not. Now they're buying it online. So what's really great about that is that I'm not talking about the COVID issue, but what's really great about that is everybody in the world, I'm exaggerating, but almost everybody in the world is getting so digitally literate now. They know how to go and do things and make things happen. And that's a big step forward. And they're not going to be a pro gamer, but they're going to get the idea of how to make things happen through the internet, through the web, through technology.
You know what? That is, you nailed something that I think is extremely important for the listeners out there and everyone who's paying attention right now. The fact that we have effectively created even more digital natives through this pandemic, as horrific as it has been, there are more people that know how to use their phones and digital technology than at any other time before. And it's not because they wanted to, it's because they had to. So effectively, necessity has triggered an evolution in terms of user experience, in terms of how we interact with each other, how we shop, how we transform commerce. What I'm looking at here, and I would really love to ask both of you, George and Marco, a question here. Again, with the Streamline lens on, why does the DSCI think that Streamline is a good fit for the supply chain groups driving transformation? How do you guys see us, and what is it that you would like to get from us?
I think, Alex, it correlates with the thing what I shared with you just when you asked one of the previous questions. Is the first time I had the opportunity to meet with you, and when you start talking to me about, let's say, the mindset of game design studio, and the way of how you do your work, guys, has changed the way of how I see games, right? And usually I was just a user before that who was entertaining himself in a way playing these games, and maybe I'm too old school, but one of my favorite games are the games which are related to either sports, because I come from Serbia, for instance, like tennis games and things like that, right? Football or basketball, but as well like manager games, like when you manage the teams as well in these aspects. So when you opened up more to me, like how things are organized, how they function, what is the methodology behind it, I started correlating that directly with business, but not business per se that you run Streamline business and then you make business from it, but how you can apply everything you do in basically refreshing how the traditional businesses are operating. And this is where very openly we see the biggest, let's say, potential and opportunity in order to share that and open up, for traditional businesses. The second thing is the thing which you both now mentioned, Alex and George, is that especially now with COVID-19, the digital readiness of the overall population skyrocketed. And in that sense, games are as well a big part of it. And people are now more than ever ready to listen to the story. So putting these pieces together and creating this, let's say, digital under quotes movement for putting games into perspective of new age business transformation is what we have seen.
Yeah, Marco, I agree, and I think Alex, your group really understands the gaming business and really understands the mind of the gamer and how to create an experience for the gamer that's worthwhile and fun. And that's super valuable. And what we find is that if you're going to implement something in a large company, and companies are large, by the way. I mean, this is not like a 100 people player. This is like a company that might have 100,000 people. So these are scale businesses, and if you can bring that knowledge of how to create collaboration and teamwork and fun, that's valuable. And oh, by the way, one more thing I have to say. Most gamers that I know, they want to win. And you know what? In business, you got to want to win. I mean, you're talking about selecting a team. I want somebody on my team that wants to win. I mean, we're going to have fun. We'll do challenges. We do all kinds. But I don't want somebody who's just going to be satisfied with coming in second. Like I come in second too much. But so I want someone who wants to win. So your idea of how people think, how they work, what gets them excited, how to keep them entertained, how to help them win, I think is really valuable.
No, I appreciate that, gentlemen. And I think that, for us as well, we're on the same way. We do want to win. And we want to win in creative ways. We want to win and create a new future and a place where everything can come together. And honestly, what's exciting us about the future right now is just really how traditional commerce, traditional business, traditional supply chains have merging or are merging with new ways of doing things in the digital space, and how gaming technology can help solve a lot of current issues and create new opportunities for things that we haven't even seen before. I really, I'm curious, George. There's, we're getting towards the end of the show right now, but I was wondering if you could share a little bit of something that struck you when you started working with video games. And I mean, your time at IBM to then crossing over into PlayStation. Obviously, you went from one big corporation to the next corporation, but you were working with something innovative, something fun. What drew you to the game space? I mean, I'm curious, how did they convince you to come over? I'm curious if you don't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, I don't mind. Well, the truth is, one of I hate to admit this, but on this call, but I'm also a father, and that, of course, from a gamer's perspective, is probably a bad thing because it means that I'm the dad on the team, and they kind of have to carry me most of the time. But anyway, I've played video games from the beginning, and when one of my older kids got an Xbox, I got him an Xbox, and he started to play. I would play with him, and I kind of evolved along with the industry, not ever getting good at any game, but I know how to work a controller. And oh, by the way, one thing we haven't talked about is the platform is not just a console like an Xbox or a Nintendo or a PlayStation. It's also your mobile phone. So that means that I don't know how many mobile phones are on the world, but there might be 7 billion mobile phones, and that means that everybody can play games pretty much. So there's mobile games that super matter, and in fact are used more than the serious pro gamer kind of games. So I think that I saw that coming. I could see that happening. I could see the changes that were going on, and I saw how much real money was in it because at IBM, honestly, Sony and Microsoft were our two biggest customers for our semiconductor business. They were the number 1 and 2 biggest customers. So there was money in it. So I said, well, okay, number 1, this is the way the world is going. Number 2, there's money in it. Number 3, there's a whole different way of thinking and acting. So if you get a room full of pro gamers in one room, in the second game you have a room full of corporate executives, and they all dress exactly the same, I guarantee you that any one of us within 10 seconds could tell which room we were in. Just within 10 seconds, just by the way they talk, act, think, work. And so it's very interesting to me to bring the talents of that gamer mentality to big business. And as Marko said, I think we're going to see more of that, and it's going to really make decisions faster. It's going to make them based on real data that happens real time. It's going to have a profoundly transformational effect on how work is done and how we live, and especially because there's not going to be anybody going to the office 5 days a week anymore. I mean that's not going to happen. So how we're going to get vaccines, things are going to be better with COVID, but guess what? People are not going to be flooding back those office buildings. So they're going to have kind of a gamer mentality about how they do their work.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you on that. I look at this right now and I think about next year and going into the future of what future of work really looks like. And you're totally right. People are going to have to adapt that gamer mindset. You got your pod, you got your ammo, you got the things you need to go out there. You're more basically independent, having to solve puzzles, having to work collaboratively and at some points on your own, and still report back in and accomplish the overall group goals. That is I guess for a lot of traditional employees or workers, that must seem like a very frightening proposition. Yet at the same time, if we go back to the idea of working with winners and people who want to win, that's an incredible opportunity, because in the end of the day, it says, if you're willing to do what it takes to get to the point where you can win and win with a team and win on your own as well, you will be super successful. I think that's, I, for one, when I look at how we do things at Streamline, we are all about basically people that have a high VUCA quotient, volatile, uncertain, complex, and people who can operate in ambiguity. I mean, that's effectively what we look for. And honestly, I think gamers, their high VUCA quotient, they're absolutely prepared to take on those changes as they go, right? As the play happens, certain things happen that you could never predict, but they're able to keep on going. And I think that is something that's just fascinating to me. So, as we go forward and we start thinking about, 2021, 2022, I know that it's kind of hard when we're thinking about where we are right now. I'm wondering, where is the future? Like, if we go all the way out and we get past this COVID, which we will, obviously, what does that future look like for business? I know this is a big one, and I've kind of leaned in on a couple times earlier on the questions, but I'm curious, like, what is the best prognosis for this? Marco, what do you think? Why don't you take the first one? What do you think this looks like?
It's $1 million question, as they say, right? I'll try to pick it up with something which, in some conversation with you, Alex, before, raised my attention in a way, and I was disregarding because I never had this data with me. And as George rightly mentioned, the data after COVID and after everybody going now digital almost like 100%, right, is the thing which will make the difference. And if we read it, we would be able to create and design new data models, but as well new business models, which we don't see. And we can see today, like, how the things related to just a simple business like home delivery, right? These guys skyrocketed. So we are not only talking about technology companies anymore. We are talking about the traditional businesses which are here to stay and which are changing because of customers' behavior. And in that sense, I would like to correlate it with the gaming industry and the new way of work, as you said. Who is the biggest nation today? And the biggest nation today are not the nations we know, but it's basically the gamers nation, right? Which has 2.1 or 2.2 people who consider themselves as gamers, as a part of global community. Mostly, those people are the next generation. So that per se will as well change the way of how we do business. This will change the way of how the services and goods are distributed, and it will change the way of how business models are operating, because this generation is coming in next 5 years. So I think all traditional needs to become new in the future, but in close collaboration with the next generation and the gaming industry.
Well said, Marco. I mean, in terms of that stat, it's 2.2 to 2.5 billion people identify themselves as gamers on a worldwide basis. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that's like China and India, almost both of them compiled together. That's the size of the gamer nation right now. George, what do you think?
Yeah, I am very optimistic about the future. I feel like there are two scenarios. I'll give you the positive one, which is what I believe in. And the positive one is, as Marco said, whole new business models, new ways of interacting to get things done. Profound changes. This means if you're a real estate developer and you've heavily invested in shopping malls, you need to be worried right now, because I don't see a future where people are flooding into shopping malls and browsing and buying. It's an inefficient way to get things done. It's much better to get peer reviews and find the best price online and so forth and so on. So you're going to see major industries just being hurt. You're going to see other industries which just do much, much better. Digitally connected industries, like one of our members is Dell. Dell's a fabulous company. They've really done some great things with their supply chain, and they're really doing right now. They can't make enough computers because people need to be connected. So you're going to see a lot more digital behavior, a lot more people understanding the value of making rapid decisions with quick data. And another really great thing we haven't talked about today is that when you're in a game, people don't know how old you are. They don't know what sex you are. They may not even know what country you're from. I mean, different games, different places. But the point is, nobody cares. Nobody cares. What they care about is, can you play the game to win? And then you're on my team. I'm happy to have you on my team. If you can't play to win, I don't care where you're from. I don't care who your dad is. I don't care anything. Get off my team. And I think that is exactly the right approach that will give us a better solution for our world, and a better, more social justice, better distributed economy. I mean, all sorts of good things will happen if we operate that way, and the way that a video game operates, where the best player wins. Now, that's what I think will happen. There is and by the way, one more thing I want to mention, Alex, is there's a lot of other cool technologies happening too, not just gamers. I just mentioned one thing I think gamers like, which is drones. Drones are huge. Drones are going to be delivering stuff to your house every day. It's amazing. So you're going to be able to control the movement of your of when you get things, through your console, so you can get things delivered to you via drone and in hours, not days or weeks. So all kinds of stuff will happen like that that'll make life better. Now, there is one possible thing that could happen that would change everything I'm saying, and that would be is if people with nefarious intents take over this gaming methodology idea and start using it to influence people in the wrong way. You can see what happened to social media. When social media started out, there was a lot about connecting people, getting them together, having friend groups, and so forth. But increasingly now, marketers, for sure, and politicians, for sure, are trying to use that community for their own objectives. So the same thing could happen with gaming. So, we got to be really careful that as we do this, we get my scenario A, which is all good, and we don't get this bad scenario B, which could happen because there's some bad people in the world. So we got to make sure the good people win, and that's scenario A.
George, you brought something up that I think is worth diving into a little bit, and that is basically through gaming, there is no unconscious bias. That unconscious bias disappears because you just don't know it. You frankly only deal with results. You can't deal with anything else because really you're seeing what the person can do. And I think that is a true statement that I think is one of the benefits of video games that I think will benefit the world at large. And you also brought up an interesting point regarding basically the manipulation of this medium and the responsibility that honestly everyone who's in this space has to understand that there is a good way to apply technology and there is a bad way to apply technology. So we do need to retain and remain vigilant on every aspect of how it develops and how it's utilized. I think that's something that, really what I could say about what the games industry could learn from other industries is how to self-police and self-regulate so that we don't run into situations where next thing we know, we have governments interfering in the way we do our things. And, obviously there's a lot that goes in on that from, the big loot crate scandal that is still playing out here to basically just, workers' rights and, the entire idea of crunch. I mean, those are things that, the games industry can learn from the mature industries. And what I really believe that the DSCI and that tie into the games industry could very much mean for our industry and really its growth, because in the end of the day, the more we interact with mature industries and industries of which they have figured out and solved their scaling problems over, decades, whereas we're only around for 30 years, that is a great exchange. That means that we will become and grow into our own and get the opportunity to learn from these other businesses and learn what worked and what didn't work. That just means being humble and open to the fact that we also, as an industry, have a lot to learn. And I know specifically for Streamline, that is one of the biggest reasons why we love being a part of the DSCI is the learning that comes from hearing experienced people, experienced players, being able to sit down and say, hey, listen, this is what we have seen. This is what we have learned. It's phenomenal.
Well, Alex, if I can add something to that, I think you're absolutely right. And I'll just ask a question to you. I know you're interviewing Marko and I, but I want to interview you for a second. Let me ask you this: there are some games which have a lot of socially unacceptable behavior in them, and I've played these, and I play these games. So, for example, my older sons, they like to play GTA, Grand Theft Auto, and I'm sure you've played that game. But that game is filled with everything you are a bad person. You're doing bad things. Everything you do is not right. What about that? Is that good? Is that okay? Or is that not good?
The thing is, like all mediums, like we can take a step back and this is not a flog answer. This is just really my honest opinion on this is like all mediums, we have different forms of expression for it. I mean, you have in GTA what effectively is a rated R movie. If you really look at it, that's the equivalent. It's a rated R movie. That's what you're watching. You expect what's going to come from it in terms of language, in terms of violence, the gratuitousness. That's all part of what you get, and that's the reason why the ratings exist. Do I think it's good or bad? Well, honestly, personally, in the end of the day, I'm not here to play content police. I think that if, as a father, if my children start playing it, well, they're 5 years old. They shouldn't be exposed to that. But I think as adults, everyone can determine where to go on and what to see. But what I would say, to be honest on this one, even further, is that what GTA has done, what the entire Grand Theft Auto franchise did for this industry, is that it proved its ability to tell a narrative storyline, even though it's an open world game, its ability to produce high value content and bring people to a tentpole event to where, 2K releases the game and opening day is $1 billion opening. So from a pure expression standpoint, I actually find it entertaining. From a business standpoint, completely blew the doors off and said video games is here. As a parent, make sure you know what your kids are playing, obviously, but also from a use of technology, they created this open narrative, this open world in which you can explore and immerse yourself into it. And I think it's something that basically showcases a future where we will be doing more of that. Does it mean it's going to be more violent and more vulgar? I don't think so. I think it comes down to the people who create the products. I think, though, in the end of the day, we have to be very clear what we decide to consume, at what level we consume it. That is completely personal choice. And that is why ratings exist. That is why we basically have dialogue and discussion around the content that is made. And this goes back down to the industry, again, self-regulating, self-policing, and understanding what it's making and the responsibilities it has before someone else comes in. And, George, you say it in a nice way, but I would hate it for Uncle Sam to come in and tell me in a non-nice way. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I agree with you. And I still play Grand Theft Auto. So, I think you're right. There's choices that people make. I think that game really illustrates a lot of important things about society and indicates some trends that we should really manage carefully in real life, not just in what we're playing. And in business, I have to tell you, there's a lot of deals that get done that are not really the right deals. There's a lot of things that happen that shouldn't happen. This is, there's not business is not get a G rating. Let's be honest. Business is not get a G rating. It's an R-rated sport too. So we just have to manage that and do the right thing.
All right, guys. Well, this was a rip-roaring conversation. Honestly, I really appreciate your time and effort and the willingness to share and discuss this. The DSCI, Marko, if people want to come and find out more, where can they go to hear more, learn more about the DSCI?
Yeah, they can visit our homepage. This is a place where we try to be digital in a way and keep all our research and things we can share with the general supply chain community or business community, apart from being membership. And then, anything more from that, going towards more engagement, we can be contacted directly, but all the things can be found online. I don't want us to be cheesy and, salesy in such a good conversation. So the way why Institute has been created, and I'll finish with that, is that, we help sharing the applied knowledge from the members or community we work with in order to transform supply chain. So coming from that, I think our webpage would be the main, pillar for everything. And then apart from that, the paths might cross or not. But as far as we leave a mark with what we are doing, like we are doing together with Streamline, and we are very proud to have you as members, is something why we exist.
And George, let me ask you, when will we see more of your excellent writing and analysis regarding gaming and just overall the merger between these industries and in business in general?
Well, there's two things that are happening. Thing number one is we have two large companies that are very famous, that everybody who's listened to this call know, who are experimenting now with this gaming idea that we've just talked about. And so we will report out on those, assuming they go well. But they're just at the very beginning. The second thing is we're going to be publishing more articles about this as we go forward. And as Marko said, our websites, it's dscinstitute.org, dscinstitute.org. If you go there, you'll see some of the stuff as it comes out. And of course, we're active on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can join our LinkedIn or Twitter, follow us on any of those things, and you'll get a chance to see how gaming and business come together.
That's awesome. We're looking forward to that. Well, everyone here, thank you again for your time. And if you're wanting to know more, please do visit our websites that have been listed on there. Of course, you can follow Video Game Real Talk, coming out with shows quite frequently. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. You can hit us up on StarvUp. as well as basically going onto YouTube, Startup also there as well. Everyone, thank you for listening, and we look forward to the next one.